how does it feel to not be swimming right now?
You won't believe this is the first summer in about 29 years
Oh,
that I've
wow.
not been in a pool, So it feels so weird. I'm actually feeling the heat a lot more. You won't believe every summer, you'll actually see me with a jacket, all zipped up because I'm in the water 6-7 hours a day.
Yeah.
Because either I was, training to be a competitive swimmer, or I'm now teaching or coaching. So very, very weird for me because I told you the other day we got my entire team, our coaches, our competitive swimmers, even my own kids. We just put on our swimsuits at home, with our cap and our goggles. Some of them went and stood under the shower with it, just because we miss it so much. So I think swimmers are getting hardest hit because you can't really do anything at home that will compare you to that, experience of being in that crystal clear water. So, we're just hoping that things will slowly start, easing off. And, like all over the world, people are sort of getting back into pools with new norms, of course. So hopefully soon in India as well.
Yeah, I do hope so. And, as you said, summer at least a couple of times, it feels great to be in the swimming pool. And, that's one big thing that we're all missing, actually.
Yeah.
And also, I just wanted to share this. So when I was, studying my 10th in, Kumarans, we had quite a number of, swimmers from, Kumarans. And then when I shared this, that this webinar is happening, one of my classmates, Ramya Vishwanath, I'm not sure if you know
Yes,
her.
yes. Ramya used
Yeah,
to swim with me.
yeah. Ramya Pingnan said, "Oh, so nice. I know, Nisha." So Ramya, Dayanand, Kavya, all of
Yes,
these,
yes. Oh, you
all
know
of
all
these.
of them.
Yeah. Oh, that's
So
great.
we
Okay.
competed against each other and we're still good friends till date.
Oh,
I
nice.
think when you're part of a sport, you have that bond for life. So we all train together.
Yeah.
And a lot of people consider swimming an individual sport,
Yeah.
more so than, sports like cricket. I have a friend who's a cricketer and he says cricket is actually quite a selfish sport where everyone's in it for themselves.
Yeah.
Yes, you see them playing for India, but they all want to score the highest. But in swimming is the opposite, even though we compete individually,
Mhm.
we don't go anywhere if you don't have our teammates to train every day. So we have this amazing bond. We've done so many Zoom calls in this last few months. Different swimmers. I mean, I have the younger group. I'm like the grandma of swimming. They used to call me because I swam for many years into my mid 20s. Imagine. The older group, the younger group. My friends from Australia when I trained briefly over there. So just amazing to connect with everyone.
And what I'm also glad about is I have, there's also, Sunil Kumar, who is also in this, call. He's the one who taught me swimming
Oh,
very, very
great.
late in the life cycle, but I'm really glad he's also here.
Oh,
So
great, great. So
yeah.
a lot of people waiting to. Oh, we have someone saying swimmer in Sydney.
Yeah, hello Nisha. Pleasure to talk to you. I
Hi,
think
how are you?
I should thank Pradeep. I should thank Mulya for this opportunity to that they have set up for us to talk to you. I'm doing great, by the way. Yeah,
Hi, thanks
mm,
so much.
yeah. Looking forward to the talk.
Thank you.
Okay, let's get started. Good evening, everybody. We have enough participants that we can get started with. Being a host, you always have this job of introducing the speaker for the day. So what do you quickly do? You read up and pick up facts, validate the facts, and then get your script right. But when you have someone like Nisha, you don't need to do any of that. That's a you're having a celebrity there. So I'm going to take 1 minute of my experiences with Nisha. I get to run with Nisha, so that's where our connection starts. Fine. 4:30 in the morning on a Saturday is or probably little earlier on a Tuesday when we have to complete our speed training. Nisha and me run together, and that's where our bond started. Amazing, phenomenal woman, not just for the sports person that she is, but for the balanced human being also. And what's amazing about Nisha is not the 600 medals, gold medals that she has in her kitty there, but how she's able to put together all her life experiences into running the most successful swimming academy called the Nisha Millet Academy. Okay, that's the most sought for academy today, whether you are training to be a triathlete or competing or just want to learn swimming for leisure. I'm not going to take any more of your time, Nisha. Over to you, and thank you so much for accepting and being with us this evening.
Thank you so much, Deepa. I'm not sure if a lot of you know who don't know Deepa personally, but I look up to her as well. And why? Because we call her the endurance queen. I mean, I used to pride myself, okay, I've swum, 16 kilometers in a day. Well, the last time we had a 24-hour stadium run, all I did was a 1-hour team relay, where 2 hours, where I ran approximately to 21 kilometers. Well, Deepa did an entire 24 hours, and it was what, 130 plus kilometers, right?
136, yes.
136 kilometers. So that's insane. So I think Deepa and me bond because I think all athletes are a little bit mad somewhere, especially endurance athletes where we learn to push the boundaries. So excited to be here today. Thank you for tuning in, taking, your precious time to come and listen to my experiences. I'll start right at the beginning. It wasn't a fairy tale story. It wasn't, me getting into a pool and swimming like a fish. You see these young babies, in these videos. The parent, pushes them into the water gently at 1 year, and they flip over, and they're looking so blissful. Mine started the opposite way. I had a near drowning experience, and what happened was, we were playing around a pond with my friends. I was just 5 years old. I lived in Hyderabad at the time, in Secunderabad, where my dad was posted. And we were just playing and having a good game of running and catching. And by mistake, a friend knocked me into the pond. And obviously, it wasn't very deep, but even then, it came just above my head. And obviously, you panic, you start choking, you're swallowing water. And just a few seconds later, my dad, they'd called my dad and they came, pulled me out. But just those few seconds was enough to, give me hydrophobia. So I had a serious case of hydrophobia for the good, I say 4 to 5 years, where, we moved to Chennai. I'd love to go to the beach, but I'd stay far away from the water. I'd go to a hotel, I'd stay away from the swimming pool. And so finally, Dad realized, my God, this girl has quite a bad case of hydrophobia. We need to get her out of this. So it was a hot summer like this, in Chennai. And the pool close by was about just a 10-minute walk. So Dad said, come on, summer camps, it's the in thing. It's so hot in Chennai, let's go and join. And he talked it up and he managed to convince me, to, go in with this positive attitude. Let's see how it goes. I've signed you up for a swim class. I was very excited, walked in on my first day. Sadly, the lady who was coaching me was the wife of a swim coach. So had no, practical training herself. So without even teaching us how to blow bubbles or float or get our bearings in the water, the first day, consisted of them putting us at the edge of the pool and pushing us into the deep end. Now, I'm sure a lot of you will, who have learned swimming, back in the 80s, 90s in India, will understand what I'm saying. Where this is the done deal. Push people in, and some people learn how to swim. I, of course, already with a bad case of hydrophobia, I freaked out. I again choked, swallowed some water, literally scratched my teacher, my swim teacher, and she had to drag me to the side. And day one itself, I thought, okay, I hate swimming. I don't want to do this ever again. I got out of the pool and told my dad, this is it. I'm not swimming ever again. And that's when he said, Nisha Millet, he said, get back in the water right now. I paid 100 rupees, for the class. And back in, the early 90s, 100 rupees was a lot. So that is the only reason I kept swimming, because he said, finish the class and then we'll see where we go from there. So, again, a couple of days of, pushing us into the deep. He spoke to the teacher and said she's already had a bad case of hydrophobia. Don't make her even more scared. And frankly, I didn't really learn much in those 2 or 3 weeks of summer camp. And it was my dad who finally decided, I need to get this girl out of this fear, and this class hasn't done it. So he took the time to get in the water. He's an average swimmer himself. He would play, in Chennai. He grew up in Chennai. So used to just being at the sea and playing around. So he taught me whatever he could. He'd take coins and drop them in the water. And that's how I really started developing my love for the pool. My sister also had a very bad case of asthma. And swimming is one of the best things you can do to strengthen your lungs. So the doctor anyway said, put her into swimming classes as well. Hi. Sorry about that, guys. I just got a call. So what I was trying to say is, my whole family became like a, family activity. And so that was the best part, that the whole family could be involved. That really helped because, when my whole family came, it became a fun activity, something I looked forward to. I'd finished school. Even after summer holidays, I continued to go to the pool and have a good time. And I've always been a sporty kind. I played a bit of gymnastics. When it got to the high beam, I said, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I tried a bit of badminton. I just wasn't fast enough, or I didn't love, I wasn't passionate about it, but I wanted to do it every day. But somehow swimming was slowly growing on me, and my dad was, teaching me really well. So what happened was I saw a small team training at the side of the pool. And it looked like a lot of fun, girls and boys chatting while they're holding their kickboards and kicking across the pool. And I could just about swim a lap of the pool by then with a lot of effort, after about 2 months. And so I went up to the coach and said, could I join this team? And he said, sure, but you need to be doing at least 10 laps, and I was a really scrawny, skinny, little quiet kid, and he probably didn't think very much of me, but, I had that determination. I said, I want to do this. This looks like fun. So, I helped, got a few friends to help out, my dad's friends who knew a bit more swimming. They taught me how to breathe, just the basics of swimming. And before you know it, I swam the 10 laps. I went and spoke to the coach, and that was it. Like they say, the rest is history. From the second I started training with a team, I was just talking about this before this with Pradeep, who was asking me the question. But, people think of swimming as an individual sport, but really it's all about the team. The second you go in and you have people to chat with, people who love, being in the water. I'm always like a very visual learner. So I'd watch the top swimmers, see what kind of technique they're doing above the water, under the water. So I was always observing them. A lot of people, in their mind, they sing songs and they're in their own world when they're training. But I was very observant and I was very, very competitive. So the competitive streak started coming out at a very young age. And one good thing that my dad did, something they do in India a lot, which is they say, oh, he's a boy, you can't catch up with him. Or, Nisha, you're just 10. There are people who are 14 years old swimming with you. You can't catch up to them. My dad was the opposite. So both my parents, in fact, very encouraging, but they would say, it doesn't matter what age someone is. It doesn't matter how much older they are to you. If you put in your effort, think about being the best in the team. That should be your immediate goal. So this was quite a good team. And before you know it, I started overtaking people, girls my age, that's like girls older than me, boys my age, and a couple of older boys as well. And that's when I think I really got hooked, more than the winning the medals, it was competing at every single session. So let me just tell you what a normal day in the life of a swimmer would be. I mean, not just swimmer, but a lot of athletes, pro athletes do this in India, and not many people know what they go through. From a very young age, I learned to swim at 9. By the time I was about 10, just 6 months into my swimming, I realized, I'm really loving this and I want to go to the Olympics. Now, normally, you wouldn't hear a lot of people supporting you because India was not known for any Olympic athletes, and swimming definitely not. So, I decided, this was 1992, and I was watching the Barcelona Olympics, and then I just said, I want to be there. That's my dream. And my dad said, okay, so let's work towards it. And my mom and dad rallied around. My sister as well got into competitive swimming. So I had a picture of the Olympic rings pasted on the side of my bed. So what happens when you wake up early morning and you're wondering, why are you doing this? So we wake up at 4:30 a.m. And trust me, it is quite tough when you're doing a 6-day week like this. 4:30 a.m. you wake up and you're like, your body's you're in so much of pain, you're exhausted. But I would see that, picture of the Olympic rings, and that would just, get me out of the bed in a flash. In fact, I would go and wake up my parents. So I never waited for any kind of alarm. It was almost clockwork for me. I really wanted to be at the pool. So I'd wake up my parents. They'd take me to the pool close by. We'd swim started off with, smaller distances, but towards the peak of my career, we were doing about 8 kilometers of swimming in the morning. So that was 8,000 meters. So swimming is quite a lonely sport, like I said, when you're actually in the pool, because you're swimming up and down in one lane and you're staring at a black line at the bottom of the pool. And, there's a lot of sensory deprivation because all you can hear is the light rush of the water. Occasionally a whistle from your coach trying to tell you to go faster or when to start. And, that's why they say swimmers are so talkative, We spend so many hours. But what really helped is being part of a great team, and all of us trying to work towards the same thing. So 2.5 hours in the morning, I'd finish off. We start at 5 a.m. and finish off by about 7:30. And I would, my mom would pack a little snack box of my breakfast. I would eat, an idli sambar or, a sandwich on the way to school. And once I got to school, I was expected to do the same thing any other school kid or, later on a college kid would do. So I'd sit through the whole day at school, and it was quite tough because, all my friends would say, I stink of chlorine, and, a lot of them still tease me about it now because you're coming straight from the pool. And, try and quickly use, make maximum use of my time. So one thing that I think you really learn as an athlete is time management. Number one, because swimming is a lot about 1/100th, I missed out on medals, I missed out on Olympics by, milliseconds, 30 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds. So you understand the value of time, but you also, as a young athlete trying to balance both studies and swimming, learn how to really manage your time. So I would finish my homework in lunch break. So while I'm chatting with my friends, I'm also trying to finish some homework because I know I don't have time when I go back home. So finish, school at about 3:30, and then head home just to have a quick bite. Back at the pool at 5 o'clock in the evening, and back to the grind again. Another 2.5 hours, another 7 to 8 kilometer session. As we grew older, we had to also incorporate some strength training. So in those days, our coaches and our parents did everything. My swimming coach, was also my strength and conditioning coach. My mom was not only my dietitian, would cook up some good meals for me. She would also be, my manager, try to message people, try and ask for funding. My dad was like my sports psychologist and my, biggest cheerleader. So both my parents were there at the pool morning and evening. So I have to say hats off to them. Now as a parent myself, I realize how tough that is to kind of put everything else on hold. I mean, they would still go to work, they'd still do their jobs, but they knew that this is something, a goal that I had that I really wanted to achieve. And they were there with me throughout. So my parents taught me a lot of good things through my swimming years. One of them I'd like to share with you, which I tell other, adults and kids that I meet over the years. My dad used to start talking to me at a young age. He's also a motivational trainer. So he used to do a lot of events for corporates. And, initially I just thought it was him giving me a pep talk. But as I've grown older, I've realized how much it really meant to me as an athlete, but also in life. So he talked about the 3 H's, the first one being hunger. So what really started off my hunger, closer to getting to an Olympics. I told you my dream, yes, was to get to the Olympics. I narrowly missed out in the 1996 Olympics. I was just 14 years old. And as I mentioned, my parents didn't let me think that I was a kid and I couldn't swim with the seniors. So at the age of 12 itself, they enrolled me for a senior event. And, I won all the gold medals at the senior level. I was swimming with 20-year-olds. And so then I started going for international meets. So by the time it came around to the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, even though I was just 14, me among maybe the 5-6 others, we were the top swimmers in India, and we did have a shot of qualifying. So the International Swimming Federation has these qualifying timings. And I narrowly missed out in 1996. I know there's so much of politics in Indian sport, which everyone knows. Some athlete who is from America, never ever swum in India before, but her dad was Indian. She came, bribed some officials, and finally she got to go for the 96 Olympics. And when my parents went and told them, listen, Nisha's 14 and she's one of the national champions and she missed very narrowly, so why don't you give her a chance? They said, no, let her earn her way. So my dad said, see, I'm not going to bribe any officials for you. If you want to get to 2000 Olympics, you need to make up your mind. You need to push yourself, and we'll do whatever we can in terms of effort and finances to help you get there. So 96 I missed out, and then 97 I was very lucky to get a scholarship to go and train in America. So I wanted to show you something that I got when I was there. This is a USA swimming t-shirt by somebody called Gary Hall Jr. His dad was also an Olympic swimming champion, and this was at the 96 Atlanta Olympics. He actually was wearing this t-shirt when he won the 100th gold for America in swimming, and he won this in the 50-meter freestyle, making him the fastest man in the world. And in 97, when I went to the US on the 3-month scholarship, I stayed with an American family. It was very scary. Everything was new. I was only 15. And what happened was, I met someone through this family, and he would, buy these kind of pieces, this sports memorabilia for charity. So he had bought this, and, purely for charitable purposes. When he heard that, a kid from India has come all the way to the US to train, and she loves Gary Hall Jr., she wants to get to the 2000 Olympics, he gave me that t-shirt and he said, I paid a lot of money for this, but I don't care because I know that, you said your Olympics is your dream. And one day I want you to have your own t-shirt. So it was already framed, and I came back and, I took such pride in it and would look at it all the time. And that's really where my journey began. And, 4 years later, happy to say I got my own. So 2 very prized possessions. That's the Indian team t-shirt. So on top here it says Sydney 2000 Olympic Indian team. So I have these framed, and, I've told my kids that, I've got twin girls, so both of you get 1 t-shirt each. So that's where my dream started. So I was mentioning what my dad, told me when I started chasing this Olympic dream. We talked about the 3 H's. The first H is that hunger I mentioned. And my hunger came from knowing, okay, this is what I want. It was like this relentless pursuit. If you read, if you guys are, sports fans, you should read Abhinav Bindra's book, where he talks about his unrelenting pursuit, almost like an obsession, his obsessive pursuit, to get that Olympic gold. And he did. For me, it was get to the Olympics, and the first H was, that's why I never had to worry. I'd finish a swim meet. Next morning, I'm back in the pool. Jan first morning, when everybody is, stayed up late or gone for a party, I was back in the pool. I missed, birthdays and friends' weddings, and, the real friends who knew what I was chasing still stuck by me through all this. But it was really, really tough. So that hunger, I think, from me, my parents saw that, and that pushed them also to put in a lot more. So that was the first hedge. The second hedge is, of course, hard work. I think all sports people know this, that you have to put everything out there every day. And this is a lesson you learn from the age of 9. From a very young age, I was this quiet kid, and swimming really brought out that confident person in me, because, we have 8 lanes in the swimming pool, and you'd have almost 10 swimmers in every lane, because you don't have that much of space. And from the very beginning, I said I was very competitive. So I wanted to lead the lane. So if you lead, you start first in the lane and you swim in a clockwise direction. And after 5 seconds after you, there's another swimmer. After them, 5 seconds, the next swimmer. So you're leading about 10 swimmers in your lane. So sometimes, once we did a set which was 100 hundreds, which is 100 times 100 meters, which is 10 kilometers, It was insane. Like even now, it would be considered a very, very tough thing to do. And I was leading that lane, and I had 9 swimmers behind me. And that's when you learn a lot about leadership. By the 40th, 50th, 100th, I need to go to the restroom really badly. So I quickly put up my hand, and, we have very little rest. We were doing this on 1 minute and 30. So we had to finish in about 1 minute 20, minute 22. You get about 7-8 seconds to catch your breath, sip a little bit of water, and get ready to go again. So we had to do this 100 times. And I wanted to use the restroom at, at the 50th repeat. And I asked my coach, and he said, too bad, you're leading the lane. If you stop, everybody else stops, their timings get disrupted, carry on. So I think sports really makes you tough, because you have to fight through the pain, mentally really push yourself to every day give it your best. And you have bad days, of course. I've had many, many injuries. I've had bad shoulder injuries. But that hard work was, unwavering. Like I said, we would do this morning and evening session 6 days a week. And I did this for almost 14, 15 years. But when you're talking about hard work, I'd like to say, as much as I think I worked hard, a lot of you would have heard of Michael Phelps, the greatest Olympian of all time. Now, he epitomizes hard work. So what he did is, when in the 2000 Olympics, which was also my first Olympics, he was only 15, I was 18. But at 15, he came 5th, which is still incredibly, it's probably one of the best finishes ever for a 15-year-old in an Olympics. But he wasn't satisfied with that. He came back in 2004 and won 2-3 gold medals. He still wasn't satisfied. He said, how am I going to be better than the entire field when everyone is doing similar workouts? He is obviously very gifted physically, but he said, others are just as tall, as strong as me. What will keep me, one step apart? So I had, again, the dream of getting to the Olympics. What was his goal? He wanted to be the greatest Olympian ever. And he wrote this down, which is something, I think, a good thing that sports people do, which is write down your goals, whether it's short, mid, or long-term goals. His long-term goal was 2004. 2008, I want to be the greatest Olympian ever. I want to break Mark Spitz's record of 7 gold medals at the Olympics. And I want to win 8. And not only did he manage to qualify for 8 events, which is very tough in America, he also won those 8 goals. So how, you ask? He said, what more can I do? So he realized, okay, everybody else, including my closest rivals, are taking a Sunday off. But why? If I'm fit, unless I'm sick or I'm really tired, I'm going to swim on that Sunday as well. So he would do Sundays as well. So what happened was, in a year, he would get almost 50 days of extra training. So between 2004 and 2008, he got close to 200 days of extra training. And what happened was, there were some events that he won by, like I said, 0.01 was his closest margin of victory. So that's what it takes to be the best ever. Okay, I know Abhinav Bindra tells me how, as a shooter, you don't have to be very physically strong. But he would get up in the morning and he would run on the treadmill at 3:34 in the morning. He worked with the top scientists. He was lucky, his parents were able to give him the access to the best possible, they had funding, so the best possible equipment. But everyone I've talked to, talk about hard work. So that was the second hedge that is very, very important. And the third and most important hedge, when you do achieve those goals, and you're, the most important hedge, I would say, is humility. Because at the end of the day, I've met some of the world's top athletes. I'm privileged to meet some amazing athletes, one of them who I'll talk about soon. But what I've seen with all of them, and the reason they've had a long, successful career, and everyone's looked up to them like a role model, is humility. So even when they win, they don't get a big head. They, enjoy. Everyone enjoys their victories, yes. Immediately start planning for their next goal. Realize that, at any point of time, it's much tougher out there at the top, where, you have to defend a title, or you have to defend the world championships. Like Michael Phelps also did that. He took a break and he came back and he won some more medals. So at the end, I think he signed off with 23 Olympic medals, which is a record that no one will ever touch, likely in the future. But for me, somebody who really, when I talk about humility, I think of Leander Paes. He was a role model growing up. Why look at somebody like Michael Phelps? Sure, he's a swimmer, but we have such amazing role models in India itself. So my, big fangirl moment was at the 2000 Olympics. Leander was the captain of the Indian, sports team. And I was so excited to meet him. By then, he'd won a bronze medal for India at the 96 Atlanta Olympics. He had won about 10, 12 Grand Slams. He was world #1 with Mahesh in the doubles. And I had this whole speech planned out, to meet him. And, I stepped off a bus and, I just came face to face with him. And I just froze. And people who know me know how talkative I am. I had nothing to say. I forgot my planned speech of, hi, Leander, I'm a big fan. I'm so excited to be here. I just, just stared at him with this big grin on my face. And this guy is so amazing. There are about 120 athletes on the Indian team. And he said, hey, Nisha Millet, I heard, you're one of the first ever swimmer to qualify for the Olympics. And you're one of the youngest here. You and Abhinav are, only 18. And he knew everything about me. He'd done his homework. He knew I'd qualified for the 200 freestyle. And, immediately I was just like, wow, I mean, this is a world champion and the way he's talking to me. And, even recently I was lucky enough to be there for Leander's farewell, one of his last matches in Bangalore. This is his last year playing and maybe his 8th Olympics. So just try and digest how that is. I have friends who are double and triple Olympians, but 8 Olympics, 18 Grand Slam titles, this guy is amazing. And if you meet him, he's just the most humble person, no airs about him. The first thing I met him recently, he said, look at this picture of my daughter. What do you think? Can you see something? And she was playing tennis. And I said, yeah, I can see that same look that you had in your eyes. He said, yes, that's it, So humility really is all that it takes, to get to the top and stay on top. That's why he stayed on top all this time. And, an amazing guy. And he'll do a lot more after that as well. So yeah, those are the 3 H's that guided me a lot through my career. So talking about my Olympic experience, right? 96 was obviously a very big blow, not qualifying. So in the lead up to the Olympics in 2000, I was still 2 seconds away from the qualifying time, and 2 seconds is quite a lot. My main event was the 200-meter freestyle, and I had a good chance to qualify for the Olympics. The Olympic qualifying time was 2 minutes 7. My best time was 2 minutes 9 seconds. And here I was thinking, how am I going to get that little bit of an edge? And luckily for me, I got an International Olympic Committee scholarship to go and train in Australia. And one thing that I really understood there is for them, sports is they're so passionate. They take it very, very serious, and it's a profession. Unfortunately, in India, because especially swimming is an amateur sport, the cricketers would have their entire entourage with them. They'd have the funding. We didn't have any of that. But when I did have access to that, where even though I was training in Australia, one great thing about them is that they allowed me to have those same resources. So from being just me, I suddenly had a dietitian. I had a biomechanics expert who walk along the edge of the pool, filming my stroke underwater. I got to meet a sports psychologist who would tell me how to deal with the pressure of, being, one of the people Indians are looking up to. 1 billion Indians wanted, someone to qualify for the Olympics. Just the pressure of, my own parents, they actually sold their house in Chennai to move us to Bangalore. And then the remaining money they used to put into my swimming, because literally in my entire career, maybe our entire financial help would have been maybe 10 lakhs. And they spent close to about 90 lakhs, on my sister and my training, between foreign, competitions to nutrition, to, even swimwear, which cost me almost, I have my swimsuit that I wore at the Olympics. So this little swimsuit over here costs about 30,000 rupees, and you wear it just for 5 or 6 swims. So they really put in a lot. So I had all this pressure on me. So I had a sports psychologist to take me through that. So I trained really well in Australia. And one thing I learned from them is that they have a never say die attitude. For those of you who've seen other top Australian athletes in different sports, but even I'm sure you're not very familiar with the Australian cricketers. I met quite a few when I was there as well. But the one thing that really stood out to me is that they don't crib. As Indians, I think we do a lot of whinging and whining. Here, once I was, feeling really low, I hadn't done a good time. And then one of my teammates came up to me and said, what's with the long face? And I said, oh, I don't feel so great. I don't know if I can do it. And they're like, Nisha, you have such a great opportunity. How many Indians can come to Australia and train? We're training with some top swimmers. A few of my teammates had already qualified for the Olympics for Australia. And they said, you better have a better attitude, because attitudes make all the difference. And that really stuck with me till today. I think attitudes do make a difference. They have a never say die attitude. They will just keep at it, relentless, So even when I was not in the pool, at home, I stayed with an Australian family. and I would, go and do a bit of running on the treadmill. I do some, sit-ups. I would do all this just to make myself better. And so it really paid off. So we have these Olympic qualifying meets, and, I was all geared up to maybe try and achieve this qualifying time in the evening for the finals. So I was swimming the heats, and they talk about something called getting in the zone. This relates to even when I'm working. I think for a lot of professionals also, you have a big project coming up, you have a deadline that you have to meet. But somehow you get this laser sharp focus. Maybe you've been planning this for a long time, you put in a lot of hard work, and you go up there, you have a presentation that you have to do, and you just feel great. That's what it felt like for me that day. The previous night, I had done my visualization. I knew my timing, what I had to beat. I got up on the blocks. I felt great. I took a deep breath, and then they blew the starting whistle. I dived in, and swam, and I just felt amazing. Every stroke felt long. I did a flip turn, my underwater kick when you get off from the turn. And, I was ahead of the field in my heat, and I just felt on top of the world. I truly understood what it feels like to be in the zone. And I've had some great swims, but this felt different. I was just flying. I felt like I was on top of the water, which is what you want when you're swimming. And I think it just comes from a lot of, working on every small detail, every aspect, of what I needed to do to get to that timing, And I touched the wall, and remember, 2:09 was my best time. 2:07 was the Olympic qualifying. And as soon as I touched, which has always been my, ritual from the time I was a kid, the first thing I do is look at the stands, because my mom was there. My dad was still working back in India. And my mom was just going crazy. She was jumping up so much. And I was like, okay, great. I won the heats, but I haven't, I made it to the finals, but I haven't won the gold or anything. Why is she freaking out? And then I turned and looked at the scoreboard, and there on the scoreboard was 2 minutes, 6 seconds, and I had done 2:06, which is a good, 3 seconds of my best. And I had made the qualifying timing. And then it sunk in, and even my coach in Australia realized, and there was so much of celebration. And it was truly a special moment, calling my dad back in India, who, like I said, had never missed a practice, but he couldn't afford to also be in, in Australia, and, income would obviously come to a halt. So he took that, bad, tough decision to stay home and sacrifice seeing me at my Olympic qualifying. So I called him and I said, Dad, I did well. He said, okay. I said, I qualified, in a good position. I won my heat. And he said, okay, what was your time? I said, 2:06. He's like, okay. He said, oh my God, you qualified for the Olympics. So pretty much probably one of the happiest moments of my life. So 2000 was a fabulous year. Just before I got to the Olympics, I had another very special moment, which I've got a photo of it to share this exciting moment with me. That was getting the Arjuna Award from the President of India. I hope you can. And Olympic athletes, especially swimmers, we don't train obviously for the money. We don't win for the money. Like I said, you get gold medals. They're not actually gold. They're all sitting in a big bag under. But what we really train for are moments like this. So I can remember, flying with my parents and my coach to New Delhi, getting suited with our blazer that had Arjuna Awardee on it. And then we go through a rehearsal, and it's really funny where they tell you how the President of India is going to be sitting opposite you, and they put a small square on the carpet saying, you must stand here. And, remember, he's the president. There's a lot of security protocols. So no waving at him. Don't smile too much. Look down at the floor, because his guards will be around. Any sudden movements, they'll get panicky. So I listened to all this, but when I was actually there, when I went up, they called my name, and I'm standing in front of the President of India, and he looked so happy, and he looked so approachable, and being an 18-year-old, first I smiled at him, and he gave me a big smile, and I was like, oh, wow. And then I, did a little wave, and, the people from the back saying, no, stop that right now, and his guards are going to get a little stressed out. But it was such a fabulous moment, when he was taking all of us on a tour of the Rashtrapati Bhavan, the main area. After that, I broke out of line and said, sir, could I please introduce you to my parents? And again, they were a little worried, but because, I was a young kid, they let me introduce him to my parents who were standing in line, So for them to shake his hand is such a proud moment. The feeling that, your country really, really cares, that they're proud of you. So that was a great year. 2000 was a fabulous year for me. Getting to the Olympics, they give us a beautiful little medallion. So I swam at the Sydney 2000 Olympics. There it is. It's actually it says Games of the 27th Olympiad. And they give you a little medallion. So this is not a medal. This why it doesn't have a little ribbon around gets this. And, just being at the Olympic Village is a memory that, will stay with me forever. Being with the top athletes, 10,000 athletes made it to the Sydney Olympics, watching the Olympic torch get lit. We had an amazing athlete called Kathy Freeman, one of Australia's top sprinters. She stood in this little pool of water in a wetsuit, and then she lit the water around her with a torch. So suddenly the water started, flame shot up, and then this circular, ring of flames went above her head and became the Olympic torch. So it's so emotional. I think it's a moment when you realize, okay, I'm at the Olympics. I've made it. I've gotten here. I've achieved a dream. So even till date, when I see the Olympics, you'll always have tears of joy when I'm watching that, Olympic torch lighting ceremony. I won my heat at the Olympics. The feeling of standing there, hearing your name being called, it's unlike anything else. So I won my heat, but unfortunately, I didn't make it to the semi-finals with the top 16 athletes. So from the height of my career, where I was, 18, I was ready to go. I said, okay, 2004 in Athens, I'm going to not only be there, I'm going to try for to make it to a semi-final, which is, the next step up. Sadly, at that point of time, like, they say, adversity always comes, sometimes at your highest points. At that point, while I was, even just before I came to the Olympics, I started having this back pain, quite severe back pain. But as athletes, we're just taught, to think about pain is good. Pain is, it's good pain. Your muscles are getting stronger and you'll get over it. But this was, keeping me up sometimes at night. So I would see a physiotherapist. They couldn't see anything majorly wrong. So I would do physiotherapy. So I actually swam the Olympics with my back taped up, with that sports tape, nicely tight. But when I took off the tape, I had quite a bit of pain. And the next morning, Gopi Chand and Aparna Popat, India's top badminton players, came to take me for a sightseeing trip, of Sydney once we finished our events. And I really had a tough time walking around. So when I went back, I said, I need to get this checked. And believe it or not, for 2 years, so 2000 to 2002, I had the toughest time because I went to about 10 specialists. It got so bad that I couldn't even sleep at the night. I'd just be standing. I couldn't even sit in college. I was in Mount Carmel College in Bangalore. I would stand at the back of my class and I had this intense pain. And, people thought it's a stress fracture. So I went through, bone scans and x-rays, and I've tried everything from acupuncture to painkillers to Reiki and, distance healing, you name it. And nothing seemed to work. And I was getting so frustrated because 2004, I wasted close to 2 years. And I would try to swim and then the pain would be excruciating. So it was really tough time. And I was still, just, with all these dreams of, I felt like the nation that I'm carrying, and I couldn't be back in the water. In 2002, I was diagnosed by a doctor in Coimbatore who realized I had a benign tumor on my backbone. I mean, at that point, he just said, you have a tumor. And only when we have a surgery to take it out can we know whether it's benign or cancerous. So to cut a long story short, I went in for the surgery. My parents were stressed about the fact that it could be cancer. Me as a, as a young 20-year-old, I was more bothered about, will I ever swim again? He said, it just depends on how your surgery goes. So I had a 2-3 hour surgery. They managed to remove the tumor. It hadn't gotten to my back, so I didn't have to put a steel plate or anything on my back. But it was a serious surgery. I had 10, 12 scars, stitches, and I wasn't able to walk for 10 days. So from there, 2000, they did the biopsy. They realized it wasn't cancerous, which is the only good news. But I had to get back into, action. And I really trained like crazy for those next 2 years. I got back, trained as much, if not harder than I had trained earlier. But, like they say, life is not, all fairy tales. And 2004, I tried for the next Olympics and narrowly missed it by about 30 milliseconds was all I missed it by. And that's when I decided, as much as I love swimming and I'm passionate about it, it was just taking too much of a financial toll on my parents and obviously emotionally as well, because we literally had no money left, nothing. I think we had only the car. We couldn't even pay our house rent. And that's when I realized, things aren't really going to change. Even if I train for the next Olympics, I'm not going to be in a position to win a medal for India. And even if I do, who knows what kind of funding we have and what will it do to my parents? So that's when I took the sad decision to, retire from swimming. Retired from swimming, and the first thing that came to my mind, without having to think too much, is back to the time when I learned and had such a terrible experience of, almost already being afraid and being a hydrophobic kid, and then being thrown into the water. So I said, why don't I get back into learn to swim? Because we had a couple of very good competitive coaches. In fact, I moved from Chennai to Bangalore purely to train with the best coaches in India who all train here in Bangalore. But I realized that there are no, learn to swim coaches. So we didn't have a very strong base in India of good strokes being taught to young kids or even adults as well. So that's when this dream of, okay, let me start doing this. So number one, to help my parents pay rent, but also to do something I love. And, you know, it was just a natural decision for me. People would say, why don't you go and get something like a bank job? You'd be so secure. And I said, no, I mean, I want to do this. And it was tough because, you know, there were no heated pools back in, you know, mid 2000s, 2004, I quit swimming. So what happens, we'd have a good summer. It would just be me. My parents also joined in. It became a family affair where all of us would teach, but it was mostly me running around to different apartments, different pools. And, you know, it was tough because the rest of the year we wouldn't earn too much, and summer was our main source of funds. But I really started building up on this, and I was lucky to meet the man who now is my husband. And, you know, he really fell in love with the sport as well. And he had the corporate knowledge to help me set up, you know, things like, you know, I didn't know how to manage a database, to, you know, reach out, marketing and PR. And, you know, slowly we hired a good team, and some of them have been with us till date, you know. So we started off pretty slow, but now it's been a good 16 years. And, you know, last year alone, we taught close to 6,000 people in India, I mean, in Bangalore. So, you know, that makes me really proud, not because of the number, but because of the kind of people we taught. Our youngest were kids who come in for our parent toddler classes who are just 1 year old, where parents come in and we do a fun water familiarization thing. So like me, they don't have to be scared when they grow up, you know, so they start enjoying the water at a young age. And my oldest student to date is 84. His grandkids actually gave him a voucher to come for one of our swimming classes. So, you know, every day it's a new challenge because you can never get bored. The great thing about being, I think, a teacher, but, you know, especially in sports, is every day you're faced with new challenges. It might rain in the middle of your session. The water might turn green. You have kids at different levels, adults who are, you know, very scared. So going into swimming and going into this sport was like a no-brainer for me. But we've had some crazy challenges. So, you know, to wind up my talk really quickly, I know there are a couple of questions to be asked. You know, what have I taken from my sports career and how have I adapted it to my academy? I think two things. One is, I think I've learned, being taught for so many years, that you have to be a good follower if you want to be a good leader. Okay, so I have always looked at my coaches and I've had so many different leadership styles. You know, so I think number one, I learned how to follow very well. Even sometimes when my coaches tell me, you know, I want to change things, you know, I like to do things my way. I listen to them and I watch what they're doing. Sometimes I learn a lot from them. Most of the time, actually, I learn a lot from them. And I've learned to be a good follower, which is why, you know, I strive to be a better leader. So I've learned that, and also how to mix those leadership styles. I've had, you know, really strict coaches. Like if my coach calls me from Bangalore today, I'll still say, yes, sir, and I'll stand straight, even though I'm talking to him on the phone. Whereas my coach in Australia would say, hey, Nisha, you know, he's in his 60s. He'd say, call me Bernie. Why are you calling me sir? I'm not your boss, you know. So I took that. I had my own way of dealing with, you know, my athletes, my coaches, and those leadership styles, how I want to make it my own. And another thing, like I mentioned, is how you need to be super prepared. I think if you are prepared and you know how to manage your time well, I always had a tough time dealing with this, how to say no. I think I've become better now as a mom because I realize I have to spend some time with my kids. I also have to work, you know, and, you know, try and, you know, bring up my academy to another level. So I've realized how to manage my time, say no to things that are going to take away from my goal. And yes, setting goals. I've started this as a kid, but I would write it down. Now I don't write it down. I share it with my husband, who obviously who runs the business with me. But, you know, I not just for my swimming, you know, for my academy, yes, for my weight. So I wanted to share with you today. I hit one of my big goals, which is I've been stuck at a, you know, certain weight for a long time because it's quite tough as a swimmer to lose weight. And I love chocolate too much. And today I got to my goal weight, which is 66 kgs. And, you know, so every, you know, goal I achieve, whether it's personal or professional, I take it back to my swimming days when my dad would make me write it down in my diary. So that's another good thing I learned. And the last thing I think that's the most important is to be a good role model yourself. So if you expect your coaches to be there on time, you need to be there before them. So my coaches know that if they're training with me in summer, I'm going to be there before them. I'm going to be in the water first. You know, even if I'm sick, I'll be at the pool, but, you know, standing outside and, you know, of course, things might change now post-coronavirus, but I'd be there still monitoring how things go and, you know, making sure that everything's going well. And we have a great team. My academy has, I just have a team of 30, but we have, you know, coaches from the Northeast. We have a lot of coaches from Kerala. We have a lot of coaches from, you know, the West is swimming. And I think everyone, the good thing, you know, I love to look on the bright side of things. I say attitude is the most important, but this lockdown has taught me that, you know, it's a good time to kind of remember what you're really working for. And when you're away from the pool, away from something you love, it can be quite tedious to go back and do the same thing. I've been doing it now for 16 years. But me and my entire team, we are just waiting to get back in the water because, we miss, we even miss the kids who are crying and, holding on to us, It's amazing. Yeah, so Pradeep was asking, did I go through depression anytime after I quit competing? I think the main issue I had when it comes to depression was when I was, to that very low phase where I had this back issue, where a lot of people said, oh, she's gone, for the one Olympics, we write her off. So the only great thing is when I went back to the next Olympics, even though I didn't qualify for it, the fact that I got back in there, trained at a high level and competed, made them realize, okay, she's in it for the long haul. She gave it her all. And I left kind of on a high note, But I think the only time I really got depressed was probably when I had my kids, because I just didn't know how to manage the two. I had twins, and my husband and me decided to bring them up without a nanny. We said, we can do it because we can, our timings are, a little bit, we can set our own timings. I can move classes around and, work on my schedule. But I really had a tough time because I just wasn't getting enough sleep. I think I wasn't taking any time for myself because I'm, one of those, I'm always like, quite hyper. I'm quite always switched on, And obviously the kids, they say, oh, sleep when the baby sleeps. Well, twins, one is sleeping, the other one's awake, So it helped being an athlete where you push your body and your mind to the extreme. But I was, I think, quite depressed or, I wouldn't say postpartum depression, but really not myself for a good 1 year. And then I realized, okay, what is it that I'm really missing? I put on a ridiculous amount of weight, like 30 kgs or something. And that's when I said, okay, I need to go back to sports. And so I started swimming, running, going to CrossFit. And, as much as I love to sleep in the morning, which I'm doing now for this lockdown, but otherwise I have a 4:30 a.m. alarm 6 days a week. So twice a week or thrice a week, I see Deepa for my morning runs. I go and swim, or I have an early morning class with my triathletes. Yes, Munita was asking me, do you have a strict diet regime for swimmers who are competing? Yes, I think the great thing about swimming is you burn so many calories that you can eat pretty much anything. Obviously, you know that what goes into your body, is fueling you. So we do a lot of carbohydrates in the day, potatoes, pasta. In the night, we do a lot of protein, and always have a cheat meal. So I love my pizzas and, desserts. I would do that, and I never put on weight for 15 years almost. I was about 55 kgs. So, which is why it's very tough when I reached, almost 90 kgs post-pregnancy. And that took an effect on me until I got back, realized that my time for myself was important and I need to get fit, eat healthy. So finally in this lockdown, I've gotten back to cooking, and I've realized how much of junk I was eating earlier. So I'm actually, cooking for myself now, and I think that's helped me much fitter. Yeah, Pradeep was asking, you swim in an ocean, how different is it to swim in the ocean? Very, very, thank you for that. Yeah, so it's very different swimming in the ocean. I think you can, almost think about in the pool, you have 2 lane lines. And like I said, the water is not moving much. You can put your feet down in most places if you want to stand. Now, the ocean, even a competitive swimmer like me is petrified of going into the ocean. We are I'd say we're very respectful of the ocean. I'd always go with a boat of some locals who would accompany me if I swim. I'd always swim with another person who could always alert someone. And I'd always swim to shore, or parallel to the shore, very close to the shore. So you have to be, I think, drowning is the number 2, that it's the second highest cause of accidental death in India, which is another thing I'm really working on with my academy, promoting water safety. Yeah, Deepa, of course, is a great triathlete as well. But, I train a lot of triathletes, and it's so funny when they're really good swimmers sometimes in the pool. And this happened once where this guy who could come and swim almost 2 kilometers in the pool. And the other day, he just got tired because I was making them, scull in the deep end, practice staying afloat in the deep end without standing, and yeah, Balaji, I'll answer your question in a minute. So, I was teaching him how to scull in the deep end, and what happened was, yeah. So, what happened is he actually just got tired and just stopped, and then he almost went in. So I had to jump in with my clothes and, literally save him. And this is a guy who could do 2 kilometers, but a little time in the deep, and he just panicked. He got too tired. So I train swimmers how to keep calm, in the ocean, how to swim with others, what they call drafting, or, swimming, dragging, what we call, so swimming behind the other person. And at the end of the day, how to kind of get the best out of an ocean swim. And, it's a very, very challenging. Somebody else was asking me how I manage my schedule. I think getting up early is the key. And I've read a lot of books with CEOs of top, companies. But I think the one thing they all have in common is they wake up early. So as much as I love to sleep in, because, from the age of 9, I've been waking up at 4:30. Then I had twins and I wake up early. Then I have an academy and and then I want to work out now. But I've realized that if you put things off for later in the day, you somehow seem to either do it less effectively or don't do it at all because you're so tired. So I've realized that, 4:30 makes me a lot more productive, but it means that I have to schedule out my time quite well. So I'm quite strict with my scheduling. So it's been nice in this lockdown where I don't have too much of a schedule, but I think it's needed because I feel discipline is what made me who I am today, got me to the Olympics, got my academy doing well. So I think that discipline is what you need, setting out, goals for yourself, time, when you need to finish things, learning to say no, like I mentioned. So yeah, there's a lot of takeaways from what I've really learned. So any more questions, I'd love to. Yeah, 4:30 a.m. is a 12 a.m. for most of you. Yeah, but I'm saying, especially in this time of lockdown, if you wake up early and you just take a small walk down your road outside your house, you'll see it's so amazing. Like I've seen Bangalore. That's a good thing about running with Deepa and our groups that we run with. We run across Bangalore and the cities, the streets. It's beautiful, 4:30 a.m. You see the real, true character of the city. So I love it. I also love it. It rains. It's actually pouring outside right now. And normally first thing I do is go and jump into a pool because my favorite thing in the world is swimming when it's raining. Swimming backstroke when my head is up and swimming in the rain. That's one of my favorite things to do. Somebody else had asked me recently on this chat, what do I talk about to students who are aspiring to do more? I would say my one bit of advice to you is don't let people tell you can't do it. And, this is something that I keep telling my kids from a very young age. Anything that you think you can do. Of course, my dream being a bit of a tiger mom, I want my kids to go to the Olympics. Like, which Olympic athlete doesn't want that? But frankly, I tell them that, but I also know that if they suddenly decide they want to be an actor or, an artist or a ballet dancer, I will let them do whatever they're really passionate about. They need to be passionate about something, yes, but they can find it on their own. I'm there to support them. But, my dream is, okay, 2032 Olympics. I tell my kids, you'll be 19, I was 18, so I'm giving you an extra year. And, they're really great right now. They're only 6. But they love gymnastics and, swimming. So, yes, Pradeep, I hope to write a book someday. Right now, my dad is writing a book, He's somebody who's really put a lot into my career and had a life-threatening illness where he's now in a wheelchair. And he said, your story needs to be told. And he said, more than your story, he wants to write a book on how parents can bring up a champion and, in India. Because, it's easy when you have the funding and you have the resources. But when you don't have that, that's when it's tough. And my parents, yeah, they really put in everything. Now, as a parent now, I'm wondering like, wow, would I go to that extent of, selling my house to support my kid's career? I think I would obviously be smarter in terms of managing my money. So I tell my father that and he has a good laugh. But, coming from a non-business family, learning how to manage funds, like the fact that we can still pay our employees and, retain all our jobs, through this very tough time right now, that makes me proud, thinking that, yes, even though I have a small company, we're still doing right by them. And, our coaches really and our teachers appreciate us because, we've managed our finances, so that, yes, we are growing, but we're also taking care of our own, So, yes, hopefully a book is in the works. If my dad comes out with it soon, I'll let you all know. Geetanjali said, how do we promote this in villages? Yes. So what we're doing is I work with a brand who has brought something called OzSwim, which is the swim training, teachers training in Australia. So they brought it, of course, one is to teach us proper technique. But another thing they talk about is water safety. So the first thing we're promoting in villages, and we try and do, free seminars. We try and get coaches who are from these smaller villages to come here. And you'll be surprised, the government of India is doing a lot in these tier 2, tier 3 cities, and they're building a lot of lovely pools. But what they need is quality coaching, safety, to teach kids who normally would just jump and go into a pond or a, in a farm and, and into a tank or a well. Teach them how to just stay afloat. So what we call sculling, treading water. So this is something we're really, passionate about, and I want to do more of it, which is, water safety and how to teach these kids, number one, swimming. And then also we get a lot of calls, sometimes kids who are, talented athletes who don't have the money. So on a personal front, I help them with whatever sponsorships. I have a lot of contact with brands to, help them fund their swimming, but we also give them huge discounts, almost like negligible fees, and they come and train with our academy. So yeah, when you face, disappointments, I think the one thing you have to do is refocus on your goals. I'm not saying I'm always positive. I have, really tough times. Last year, I lost a pool, which we had literally resurrected from being a dirty green pool in next to Alsur Lake. We had brought it back to a really thriving center, and we had our contract with the government was actually April of this year. But in August of last year, the usual politics, somebody paid off the government officials and, they bribed them and we lost the tender. They gave us 1 day to vacate the pool that we had brought up and, had been training for 2 years. With Daniel, we had paid the government till the next year and we were doing really well, in terms of, in all, aspects. So that was tough coming back from that. And again, I go back to my swimming days where, we fail, I think, on a very, very regular level as an athlete. Every day when you come, you don't do your best time, especially in swimming. It's not like football where you might score a goal every other day and in training. In swimming, it's just swimming up and down, feeling terrible, exhausted, but keeping your eyes firmly set on the goal. So even if I've had a really bad day in the night, and I've been doing this recently to also get me through this, tough time of this pandemic and how it's going to change the environment for my company as well. Because we can't really swim. We can't do anything online, in swimming. We can't, do e-learning. There's only a certain, level. But yeah, thanks, Pradeep. What I would do is every night just think about 3 things I'm grateful for. Whether it's a house over a roof over my head, the fact that I have the funds to, maintain my family and friends and also my coaches, my team, and, also for my health. Because at the end of the day, coronavirus has taught us that health is everything. You have right from politicians to, musicians to everyone else, thank you, Pradeep, so much for, organizing this session with Mulya. And it was a pleasure to be a Mulya alumnary and, share my story with you. I'm not sure we have much time, but if anybody has a last 1 or 2 questions, I'm happy to answer it. And, what I would say to all of you is really, how do we know the goal we have is realistic? I think, you have to, look at, when you have a goal, it should be achievable, but also a little bit out there. Like if somebody had told me as a skinny 9-year-old kid that I could go to the Olympics, at that time, it didn't really seem doable. But, the passionate swimmer in me said I could do it, and I did. But of course, I think at that point, if I said I want to win an Olympic gold medal, may not have been possible for other reasons like the environment, the kind of facilities we have. So, I think maybe you can always take that goal of yours. If you don't think it's going to happen, you can change goalposts a bit and, re-envision it, but, still go in that general direction. But I think the main thing is just being true to yourself. Are you doing it for yourself? My parents always told me, if the day you want to stop swimming, you should do it. And that's what I did. When I stopped enjoying it, because I was worried about their funding, the money, how my family going to manage financially. That's the day I stopped enjoying swimming, at least the competitive training, and I stopped swimming. So do it only because you're doing it for yourself. If you're doing it for anybody else, even if there's students watching here, if your parents are forcing you to become a doctor and engineer, tell them, listen, not just sports, but there's so many other careers now, whether it's media or sports or whatever, that you can do as well. You can follow your passion. You can still make a profession out of it. And, you will be doing something you love. I have so many of my coaches, some of them are part-timers, but they're lawyers and doctors and engineers, and they come in to teach because they said, I do this because it earns me my money, but I come to teach and be in the pool because that's what I'm passionate about. So I'm one of those lucky people that, my friends say I have not changed in years. I still smell of chlorine. I still get to wear swimsuit or track pants to work, and I get to, touch so many lives. Yeah, thank you, Geetanjali. It's really nice for, to have all of you listening. And, great to have that interaction with all of you as well.
Nisha, you've given me goosebumps.
Sorry?
You've given me goosebumps. Listening to your story has been so mesmerizing. When are we having your movie coming up?
Oh, God.
The funding is not going to be tough for that, for sure.
Yeah, watching Mary Kom at that movie, and that girl is, another amazing athlete. So I'm so glad a movie is made of her because she got to the top, an Olympic medal without the money, so it shows you that it can be done.
The way you've put it across, the 3 H's, okay, that's something that we can all incorporate into our lives, immaterial of whether you are an athlete or not. Hunger, hard work, humility are the 3 bases of being a good person, right? A good citizen, a good mom, a good human being, right?
Thank you so
it
much.
has been such an amazing experience. And I have known you for a while, and this has been the best interaction. Love you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for organizing this. Thank you to all of you who joined in from all over the world and all over India. It's wonderful to share my story with you.